The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in Elite Combat Academy, casting harsh shadows across the worn blue mats. It was 6:30 p.m. on a Friday, the busiest time of the week when office workers traded their suits for training gear and students squeezed in sessions between classes. The gym smelled like sweat, leather, and the faint scent of disinfectant that never quite masked the intensity of countless training sessions. Maya wiped the sweat from her forehead as she approached the heavy bag in the corner. She had been coming to this gym for exactly 3 months and 2 weeks now, always choosing the same spot away from the main training area. The corner felt safe, tucked behind a row of equipment where she could practice without drawing attention to herself. She preferred it that way. 3 months ago, Maya's life had taken an unexpected turn. Walking home from her software engineering job downtown, she had been followed by 2 men for 6 blocks. Nothing happened that night, but the fear stayed with her. The next morning, she searched online for self-defense classes and found Elite Combat Academy just 15 minutes from her apartment. The reviews were good, the prices reasonable, and they offered beginner classes 3 times a week. Maya started wrapping her hands methodically, a ritual she had perfected over the past few months. First the thumb, then around the wrist, between each finger, and finally securing it with the Velcro strap. The familiar routine calmed her nerves. Tonight felt different, though. The gym was more crowded than usual, filled with the weekend energy of people ready to blow off steam from their work week. As she began her warm-up routine with light jabs at the bag, Maya noticed the usual crowd gathering around the sparring mats. The advanced students always trained on Friday nights, and there was an unofficial hierarchy that everyone understood. The black belts sparred with black belts, brown belts stayed with brown belts, and beginners like her stuck to the bags and basic drills. Maya had been watching these Friday night sessions for weeks, studying the techniques and learning from a distance. She noticed how the senior students moved with confidence, how they commanded respect just by walking across the mats. There was one particular black belt who seemed to run the show. He was probably in his early 30s, tall and lean, with perfectly styled hair that somehow never looked messy even after intense training. His uniform was always crisp, his belt tied with precision, and he had a way of speaking that made everyone listen. This black belt had a group of followers who laughed at his jokes and agreed with everything he said. Maya had seen him teaching newer students, but there was something about his approach that made her uncomfortable. He had a habit of singling people out, making them the center of attention whether they wanted it or not. She had seen him embarrass a college student 2 weeks ago, loudly correcting his form in front of everyone and making jokes about his coordination. Maya focused on her training, throwing combinations at the heavy bag with increasing intensity. Left jab, right cross, left hook, right uppercut. The rhythm helped her think, helped her process the stress of her demanding job and the lingering anxiety from that night 3 months ago. She had always been athletic in high school and college, but life got busy, and fitness took a back seat to career advancement and adult responsibilities. The gym had become her sanctuary, a place where she could work on becoming stronger, both physically and mentally. She loved the feeling of exhaustion after a good workout, the way her muscles ached the next day, reminding her of the progress she was making. More importantly, she was building confidence. Each week she felt a little braver, a little more capable of handling whatever life might throw at her. But Maya kept to herself. She had always been observant, preferring to watch and learn rather than jump into situations head first. Her software engineering background had taught her to analyze systems, find patterns, and solve problems methodically. She applied the same approach to martial arts, watching how different students moved, noting what worked and what didn't. Tonight, as she worked through her routine, Maya became aware that the energy in the gym was shifting. The usual Friday night bravado seemed amplified. The senior black belt was being particularly loud, his voice carrying across the entire gym as he demonstrated techniques and made comments about various students' abilities. His training partners fed off his energy, becoming more animated and boisterous than usual. Maya tried to ignore the growing noise and focus on her workout. She had learned a new combination in Tuesday's beginner class and wanted to practice it until it felt natural. But as she moved around the bag, working different angles and distances, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was building up across the room. The black belt finished his sparring session and began walking around the gym, surveying the other students like a king inspecting his domain. He stopped to offer advice to some students, made jokes with others, and generally basked in the attention his presence commanded. Maya noticed how some of the newer students tensed up when he approached, unsure whether his attention would be encouraging or embarrassing. Maya increased the intensity of her workout, throwing harder punches and moving more aggressively around the bag. The physical exertion helped calm her nerves and sharpen her focus. She was in her element now, finding the rhythm that made everything else fade away. This was why she came to the gym, for these moments when her mind cleared and her body took over. But her peaceful training session was about to be interrupted in a way that would change everything. As Maya stepped back to catch her breath and grab some water, she noticed the senior black belt had stopped his tour of the gym. He was standing about 10 feet away, arms crossed, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. The conversation around the sparring mats had died down. Other students were starting to notice the black belt's attention had shifted to the quiet woman in the corner, who always kept to herself. Maya felt the weight of eyes turning toward her, the uncomfortable sensation of becoming the focus of attention she had worked so hard to avoid. She could feel her heart rate increase, not from the workout this time, but from the sudden awareness that her peaceful training session was about to become something else entirely. The black belt was smiling now, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that came before someone made themselves feel bigger by making someone else feel smaller. Maya took a slow sip of water, her mind racing as she tried to anticipate what was coming next. She had seen this pattern before, had watched this same black belt single out other students for his entertainment. Now apparently it was her turn. The gym fell quieter as more people noticed the developing situation, sensing that something was about to happen. Maya set her water bottle down carefully, her hand steady despite the adrenaline starting to course through her veins. She had spent 3 months flying under the radar, but that was about to end. Whatever came next, she would face it head on. After all, she had joined this gym to become stronger and more confident. Maybe it was time to find out just how far she had come. The silence in the gym was thick enough to cut with a knife. Maya could feel every pair of eyes in the room slowly turning toward her corner, drawn by the magnetic pull of impending drama. The senior black belt stood there with his arms crossed, that calculated smile still playing on his lips. He knew exactly what he was doing, and Maya realized she was about to become his evening's entertainment. "Well, well, well," he said, his voice carrying easily across the quiet gym. "Look what we have here, everybody." He gestured toward Maya with a theatrical flourish that made her stomach tighten. "Seems like our little corner warrior thinks she's ready for the big leagues." Maya felt her cheeks flush, but she kept her expression neutral. She had learned long ago that showing emotion in moments like this only gave bullies more ammunition. Her software engineering job had taught her to stay calm under pressure, to think before reacting. But this felt different. This wasn't a boardroom presentation or a difficult client meeting. This was personal. The black belt began walking toward her with the slow, deliberate steps of someone who knew he commanded the room's attention. His training partners followed behind like a pack of wolves, their grins widening with each step. Maya noticed how the newer students stepped back, creating a clear path between the black belt and herself. Nobody wanted to get caught in the middle of whatever was about to happen. "You know," the black belt continued, his voice dripping with false friendliness, "I've been watching you these past few weeks, always here in your little corner, always by yourself, throwing punches at that bag like it owes you money." A few of his followers chuckled at his joke, the sound sharp and uncomfortable in the tense atmosphere. Maya unwrapped her hands slowly, buying herself time to think. She could feel the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on her. Some students looked concerned for her safety. Others seemed excited for the show they were about to witness, but most just watched with the morbid curiosity of people who were grateful it wasn't happening to them. "I'm just here to train," Maya said quietly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through her veins. She folded her hand wraps, carefully, a small act of normalcy in an increasingly surreal situation. "Same as everyone else." The black belt laughed, a sound that carried no warmth, Same as everyone else? Oh, I don't think so, sweetheart. See, everyone else here knows their place. They understand how things work. He stopped about 3 feet away from her, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, mixed with sweat. But you seem to think you can just hide in the corner and nobody will notice. Maya's jaw tightened at the condescending tone, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had dealt with men like this before in college, at work, even in her own neighborhood. Men who felt threatened by women who didn't seek their approval or validation. Men who needed to remind everyone of their power by picking on those they perceived as weaker. "I'm not hiding," Maya replied, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm training. There's a difference." The black belt's smile faltered for just a moment, surprised by her direct response. He wasn't used to being challenged even in such a subtle way. Maya could see him recalibrating, trying to regain control of the narrative he was building. "Training, huh?" He looked around the room, making eye contact with his audience. "Well then, maybe it's time we saw what all that corner training has taught you. What do you say, everybody? Should we give our friend here a chance to show off her skills?" The response from his followers was immediate and enthusiastic. "Yeah, let's see what she's got. Come on, don't be shy. It'll be fun." But Maya noticed the newer students looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight and avoiding eye contact. They recognized what she was recognizing. This wasn't about training or skill. This was about power and humiliation. Maya's mind raced through her options. She could make an excuse and leave, but that would only confirm his narrative about her being all talk and no action. She could refuse to engage, but in a martial arts gym, that would be seen as backing down from a legitimate challenge. Or she could accept, knowing that he expected an easy victory that would cement his dominance in her embarrassment. "I appreciate the offer," Maya said, her voice carrying across the now silent gym. "But I'm not sure that's such a good idea." The black belt's grin widened. "Oh, come on now, don't tell me you're scared. All that bag work must have built up some confidence, right?" He turned to address the room. "What do you think, everyone? Should we be worried about our quiet little corner fighter here?" The mockery in his voice was unmistakable now. Maya felt a familiar fire building in her chest, the same feeling she had experienced when her college professor dismissed her programming skills because she was a woman, when her first boss tried to take credit for her code, when those 2 men had followed her home 3 months ago. It was the feeling of being underestimated, of being seen as less than she was. "Actually," Maya said, setting down her water bottle with deliberate care, "maybe you're right. Maybe it is time I stepped out of my corner." The change in her tone was subtle but unmistakable. Something shifted in her posture, a straightening of her spine that made her seem taller somehow. The black belt's followers sensed it too, their excited chatter dying down as they registered the new energy in the room. "Now that's more like it," the black belt said. But Maya caught a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He had expected her to refuse, to give him an easy victory through her retreat. Her acceptance changed the dynamic in a way he hadn't anticipated. Master Liu, the gym's owner and head instructor, emerged from his office, drawn by the unusual quiet. He was a small, elderly man with weathered hands and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Maya had always respected him, had seen how he treated every student with dignity regardless of their skill level. Now he stood at the edge of the growing circle, his expression unreadable. "If we're going to do this," Maya said, looking directly at the black belt, "let's do it right. Full contact sparring, 3-minute rounds with Master Liu as referee." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Unless, of course, you were planning something less official." The black belt's face flushed slightly. Maya had just called his bluff, transforming his intended humiliation session into a legitimate sparring match with rules and supervision. He couldn't back down now without looking weak in front of his followers, but the parameters had shifted in a way that clearly made him uncomfortable. "Fine," he said, his voice tight. 3 minutes. But don't come crying when you realize you've bitten off more than you can chew." As they began to clear a space on the mats, Maya felt a strange calm settling over her. The anxiety and nervousness from moments before had crystallized into focused determination. She had tried to avoid this confrontation, had spent months flying under the radar, but some battles couldn't be avoided forever. The crowd pressed closer, phones appearing as students, prepared to record what they expected to be a quick and decisive demonstration of the gym's hierarchy. Maya began to stretch, her movements fluid and practiced, while the black belt loosened up with flashy kicks and punches designed more for show than preparation. Neither of them knew it yet, but the next few minutes would change everything at Elite Combat Academy. The quiet woman from the corner was about to teach everyone present a lesson about assumptions, respect, and the danger of judging a book by its cover. The circle of students pressed closer as Maya and the black belt took their positions on the mat. Master Lu stepped between them, his weathered face showing no emotion as he explained the rules. Clean sparring only. No strikes to the back of the head, no eye pokes, no groin shots. When I say stop, you stop immediately. His voice carried the authority of someone who had seen countless matches over his 40 years in martial arts. Maya nodded, her breathing steady and controlled. As she moved into her fighting stance, something extraordinary happened. The nervous energy that had been building inside her for the past 10 minutes simply melted away. Her shoulders relaxed, her feet found their natural spacing, and her hands rose to the perfect guard position. It was as if she had stepped into a familiar room after years away from home. The black belt bounced on his toes, rolling his shoulders and shaking out his arms with the exaggerated confidence of someone putting on a show. He winked at his training partners and flexed his muscles for the phones that were already recording. "Don't worry," he called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'll take it easy on you." But Maya wasn't listening to his words anymore. Something deeper had taken over, muscle memory from a lifetime that nobody in this gym knew about. As she settled into her stance, her mind drifted back 15 years to a different gym, in a different city, where a 13-year-old girl had first learned what it meant to fight. Her father had been a military man, stationed overseas for most of her childhood. When the family finally settled back in the States, he had insisted Maya learn to defend herself. "The world isn't always kind to people, especially young women," he had told her. "I won't always be there to protect you, so you need to know how to protect yourself." The first martial arts school had been a small, no-nonsense Krav Maga gym, run by an ex-Israeli military instructor. Maya could still remember the smell of that place. Old sweat, rubber mats, and the metal tang of determination. She had been scared at first, the only girl in a room full of adults who took their training seriously. But fear had a way of becoming fuel when you learned how to use it right. Master Lu raised his hand. "Fighters ready?" Both Maya and the black belt nodded. "Begin!" The black belt came forward immediately, throwing a lazy roundhouse kick that telegraphed its arrival from across the room. It was the kind of technique that worked great in demonstrations, impressive to watch, but lacking the speed and precision needed against someone who knew what they were looking for. Maya saw the kick, coming before he even lifted his leg. The slight shift in his weight, the way his hip turned, the positioning of his support foot. It all screamed roundhouse kick to anyone with real experience. She sidestepped to her left, just enough to let the kick whistle past her ribs, close enough that she could feel the wind from his shin. The black belt's confident smile faltered slightly as his kick hit nothing but air. He had expected Maya to either panic and stumble backward or stand frozen like a deer in headlights. Her smooth evasion was not part of his script. Maya didn't counterattack immediately. Instead, she circled to her right, her movements fluid and measured. She was studying him now, the way she had learned to study opponents back in her competitive days. Everyone had tells, little habits that revealed their intentions before they acted. The key was staying calm long enough to read them. The crowd murmured with confusion. They had expected either a quick knockout or Maya running away in tears. This careful technical approach wasn't what anyone had anticipated. The black belt threw a combination next: jab, cross, hook, standard boxing technique that he executed with textbook form. But Maya wasn't there when the punches arrived. She had slipped the jab to the outside, ducked under the cross, and stepped away from the hook with movements so smooth they looked almost rehearsed. "What the hell?" muttered one of the black belt's training partners. He had sparred with the guy dozens of times and knew his combinations well. Those were solid techniques that should have at least forced Maya to block or back up. Instead, she was moving like she could read his mind. Maya's father had always told her that fighting was like chess but played at lightning speed. You have to think through. E moves ahead, he would say during their weekend training sessions. Your opponent throws a jab, but what's coming after that? And after that? The person who sees the whole sequence first usually wins. By age 16, Maya was competing in national tournaments. Taekwondo became her first black belt, earned through countless hours of forms practice and sparring matches. But it was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that truly changed her understanding of fighting. On the ground, size and strength mattered less than technique and timing. She learned to use an opponent's energy against them, to find leverage where none seemed to exist. The black belt was getting frustrated now. He increased his pace, throwing faster combinations and adding kicks to his attacks. But Maya continued to evade everything with minimal effort. She wasn't just dodging randomly. She was positioning herself, controlling distance, making him work harder while she stayed relaxed and efficient. Come on, the black belt shouted, his earlier composure cracking. Stand still and fight. Maya almost smiled at that. It was the universal complaint of every bully who discovered their target wasn't as helpless as expected. She had heard similar words from opponents in dozens of competitions over the years. They always wanted you to fight their fight, to play by their rules to make their job easier. Instead, Maya stepped in for the first time since the match began. As the black belt threw another wild hook, she closed the distance and executed a perfect leg sweep. It was a technique from her judo training, simple but devastatingly effective when timed correctly. The black belt's supporting leg was swept out from under him at the exact moment his weight was committed to the punch. Physics took over from there. His body rotated through the air before crashing down onto the mat with a sound that echoed through the suddenly silent gym. The crowd collectively gasped. Phones trembled in hands that had expected to record something completely different. This wasn't supposed to happen. The quiet woman from the corner had just put the gym's most arrogant black belt on his back with a technique so clean and precise that even Master Liu nodded with approval. Maya stepped back and assumed her fighting stance again, as calm and composed as if nothing had happened. But inside, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The pure joy of competition, the satisfaction of technique executed perfectly under pressure. The black belt scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. His perfectly styled hair was finally messed up, and his crisp uniform had mat burn on the shoulder. More importantly, his aura of invincibility had been shattered in front of everyone who looked up to him. Lucky shot, he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. He could see it in the eyes of his training partners, the doubt that hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. Maya hadn't just swept his leg, she had swept away the illusion of his dominance. Maya said nothing. She simply waited, balanced and ready, as if taking down black belts was something she did every day. And in truth it had been. Just not recently, and not in this gym where everyone assumed they knew exactly who she was. The match was barely 2 minutes old, but everything had already changed. The question now wasn't whether Maya could defend herself, it was how much more she was capable of, and whether the black belt was prepared to find out. The black belt wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, tasting the metallic hint of blood where he had bitten his tongue during the fall. His eyes had changed from cocky amusement to something harder, more desperate. The easy victory he had planned was slipping away with each passing second, and everyone in the gym could see it happening. All right, he said, spitting to the side and rolling his shoulders. No more games. Maya watched him reset his stance, noting how his posture had shifted from flashy showmanship to genuine aggression. This was the moment she had been waiting for, when his mask would finally come off and she would see what kind of fighter he really was beneath all the bluster and gym politics. The black belt came forward with a renewed intensity, throwing combinations that were faster and more focused than his earlier attacks. But speed without precision was just wasted energy, and Maya had learned long ago that desperate opponents often became their own worst enemies. She slipped his jab and countered with a short uppercut that caught him clean under the ribs. The impact drove the air from his lungs with a whoosh that everyone in the front row could hear. As he doubled over slightly, Maya followed up with a picture-perfect knee strike that would have ended the match if it had connected with his solar plexus. Instead, she pulled it at the last second, letting it tap his chest just hard enough to send a message. The crowd was dead silent now. Even the black belt's most loyal training partners had stopped their encouraging shouts. What they were witnessing went beyond skill. It was a complete dismantling of everything they thought they knew about fighting and hierarchy. Maya's college years flashed through her mind as she moved. She remembered the tournaments where she had been the only woman in her division, where opponents and spectators alike had assumed she didn't belong. She remembered the satisfaction of proving them wrong, one perfectly executed technique at a time. But she also remembered the cost, the knee injury during her senior year nationals that had ended her competitive career before it really began. The doctors had said she could still train recreationally, but the explosive movements required for high-level competition were off limits. Too much risk of permanent damage. So Maya had hung up her tournament gear and focused on building her career in software engineering, letting her martial arts skills fade into the background of her life. But skills like these never really disappeared. They lived in the muscle memory, in the reflexes trained through thousands of hours of practice, like riding a bicycle or typing on a keyboard. Once your body learned these movements, they stayed with you forever. The black belt threw a desperate, spinning back kick, the kind of flashy technique that looked impressive in movies but left you completely exposed if it missed. Maya saw it coming from the beginning of the spin and simply stepped to the side, letting his momentum carry him past her. As he completed the turn and tried to regain his balance, Maya was already moving. She caught his extended arm in a classic armbar setup, using his own forward momentum to help establish the position. For a moment, she had complete control. She could have taken him down and finished the submission in seconds. Instead, she held the position just long enough for him to feel the trap he had walked into, then released him and stepped back. The message was clear to everyone watching. Maya wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was teaching a lesson. The black belt's face was flushed red now, a mixture of exertion, embarrassment, and growing panic. His breathing was heavy while Maya looked like she had just finished a light warm-up. The stamina difference was becoming obvious to everyone in the room. "What are you?" he gasped between breaths. It was the first time his voice had shown any real respect. Maya didn't answer immediately. She was remembering her old coach, a weathered Brazilian who had taught her that true martial arts wasn't about domination or humiliation. "Fighting is a conversation," he used to say in his thick accent. "Sometimes you ask questions, sometimes you give answers. But always, you show respect for your partner." The black belt tried one more combination, putting everything he had left into a series of punches and kicks that should have overwhelmed any normal opponent. But Maya wasn't normal, and she had been reading his patterns for the entire match. She deflected his strikes with minimal effort, like a master calligrapher guiding a brush across paper. As his final punch extended past her guard, Maya stepped in and executed a throw that was more art than violence. She used his own attacking energy to lift him off his feet and guide him gently to the mat, controlling his descent so he landed without injury. It was the kind of technique that took decades to master, where strength mattered less than perfect timing and leverage. The black belt found himself on his back again, staring up at the gym's fluorescent lights, but this time was different. This time Maya was standing over him with her hand extended, offering to help him up. "You're telegraphing your kicks," she said quietly, her voice carrying just enough for him to hear. "Try keeping your shoulders level when you set up, and your punches are strong, but you're dropping your left hand after the cross." The gym was so quiet that people in the back could hear every word. Maya wasn't gloating or celebrating her dominance. She was doing something far more powerful. She was offering genuine instruction to someone who had tried to humiliate her. The black belt stared at her extended hand for a long moment. He could see his reflection in her eyes. And he didn't like what he saw. Here was someone who had completely outclassed him, who could have embarrassed him in front of everyone, and instead she was trying to help him improve. Slowly, he reached up and took her hand. Maya pulled him to his feet with surprising strength, steadying him as he found his balance. The physical gesture was simple, but everyone watching understood its significance. The power dynamic in the gym had shifted permanently. "I don't understand," the black belt said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" Maya smiled for the first time since the whole confrontation began. "Just someone who used to compete a little back in college." "Chai." She turned to address Master Lu, who had been watching the entire exchange with intense concentration. "Should we call it there, Master Lu? I think we've both learned what we needed to learn." Master Lu nodded slowly, his weathered face showing what might have been the hint of a smile. "Match is over," he announced to the crowd. Both fighters showed excellent technique and sportsmanship, but everyone in the gym knew that only one fighter had shown anything resembling excellence. Maya had just redefined what strength looked like in their little corner of the martial arts world. She had proven that true power didn't come from intimidation or hierarchy. It came from skill, respect, and the wisdom to know when to use both. As the crowd began to disperse, many students approached Maya with questions and compliments. But she noticed something even more important happening. The newer students, the ones who had been intimidated by the gym's aggressive culture, were standing a little taller. They had just witnessed proof that bullies could be defeated and that real strength often came from the most unexpected places. The silence in the gym stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Nobody seemed to know what to say or do next. The phones that had been recording the expected humiliation of the quiet woman from the corner now captured something completely different. A moment of genuine transformation that would be talked about for years to come. Master Lu stepped forward, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. At 73 years old, he had seen every type of student walk through his doors. Hot-headed teenagers looking for fights, middle-aged office workers trying to recapture their youth, serious competitors training for tournaments, and scared individuals just trying to feel safer in the world. But what he had just witnessed was something special. "This," Master Lu said, his voice carrying the authority that came from 5 decades of teaching, "is why we train." He gestured toward Maya, who was quietly unwrapping her hands near the water fountain. "Not to prove we are better than others, but to become better than we were yesterday." The black belt stood in the center of the mat, still processing what had just happened to him. His usual swagger was completely gone, replaced by something he hadn't felt in years: genuine humility. He looked around at his training partners, seeing doubt and confusion in their eyes. They had built him up as invincible, and now that image lay shattered on the gym floor. "I need to apologize," the black belt said, his voice cracking slightly. He walked over to where Maya was packing her gear. "What I did tonight was wrong. I made assumptions about you that were completely unfair, and I tried to embarrass you in front of everyone." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "You could have made me look like a fool just now, but instead you tried to help me improve. That says everything about who you are as a person." Maya looked up from her bag, seeing something in his eyes that hadn't been there an hour ago. "We all make mistakes," she said simply. "What matters is what we do after we realize we've made them." The conversation rippled through the crowd of students who were still processing what they had witnessed. Some of them had phones full of video footage that would need to be deleted or carefully edited. Others were questioning their own behavior and attitudes. The gym's social hierarchy had just been turned upside down in the span of 10 minutes. A college student who had been training for 6 months approached Maya hesitantly. She was one of the newer students who had been intimidated by the aggressive atmosphere, often leaving early to avoid the evening crowd. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I was wondering if maybe you could show me some of those defensive moves sometime." Before Maya could answer, 2 more students joined the conversation. Then 3 more. Within minutes, she found herself surrounded by people asking questions about technique, training methods, and how she had learned to stay so calm under pressure. These weren't just beginners either. Several brown belts, and even a few black belts wanted to know more about her background. Maya felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention. For 3 months, she had been perfectly content to train in her corner and go home. Now she found herself at the center of conversations about martial arts philosophy, competition experiences, and training methodologies. It was both exciting and terrifying. Master Liu watched the scene unfold with satisfaction. He had always believed that the best teachers were often found in unexpected places. Maya's technical skills were impressive, but what made her truly special was her character. She had power but chose restraint, had skill but showed humility, and when faced with disrespect, she had responded with grace. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere at Elite Combat Academy began to change in ways both subtle and profound. The black belt who had challenged Maya started arriving early to help newer students with basic techniques. His training partners, who had previously fed off his arrogance, began focusing more on their own improvement rather than impressing others. Maya found herself becoming an unofficial mentor to students who had previously felt unwelcome in the gym's competitive environment. She started arriving 30 minutes early to help with fundamentals and staying after class to answer questions. Her corner by the heavy bag became a gathering place for anyone who wanted to train without the pressure of proving themselves. The changes weren't lost on Master Liu, who had been considering retirement before Maya's arrival shook things up. He began incorporating more emphasis on respect and sportsmanship into his regular classes. The gym's culture evolved from one that celebrated dominance to one that honored skill, character, and mutual support. Maya's software engineering job became more manageable too. The confidence she had gained from standing up to the gym bully translated into speaking up in meetings, taking credit for her work, and demanding the respect she deserved from colleagues. She realized that the skills she had learned in martial arts, reading situations, staying calm under pressure, and responding appropriately to aggression, applied far beyond physical confrontations. The black belt, who had started it all, became one of Maya's most dedicated students. He asked her to be his training partner, genuinely wanting to improve his technique and learn from someone who had mastered what he was still working toward. Their sparring sessions became teaching moments, with Maya patiently correcting his form and helping him understand the difference between flashy techniques and effective ones. 3 months after the confrontation that changed everything, Master Liu made an announcement that surprised no one who had been paying attention. "I would like to invite Maya to become an assistant instructor," he said during the Friday evening class. "She has demonstrated not only exceptional skill, but the kind of character we want to see in our leaders." Maya accepted the position with the same quiet dignity she had shown throughout her time at the gym. She didn't want the title for the authority it gave her, but for the opportunity to help other students find their own strength and confidence. She remembered her own journey from scared victim to empowered individual, and she wanted to help others make that same transformation. The gym became known throughout the city for its supportive environment and high-quality instruction. Students came not just to learn how to fight, but to learn how to carry themselves with confidence and treat others with respect. The story of the quiet woman who had silenced the gym bully became legendary, passed down to new students as an example of what true martial arts represented. Maya still trained in her corner sometimes, but now it was by choice rather than necessity. She had found her voice and her place in the community. The woman who had joined the gym 3 months earlier to learn basic self-defense had become a teacher, mentor, and example of what it meant to have both skill and character. Looking back, Maya realized that the confrontation had been inevitable. She could have continued hiding in her corner indefinitely, but eventually someone would have forced her to choose between standing up for herself and backing down. She was grateful that when the moment came, she had chosen to stand up, not just for herself, but for everyone else who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or targeted by someone who thought they were stronger. The gym had taught Maya more than just martial arts techniques. It had reminded her that strength came in many forms, and the most powerful victories were often the ones that lifted others up, rather than tearing them down. She turned to address Master Liu, who had been watching the entire exchange with intense concentration. "Should we call it there, Master Liu? I think we've both learned what we needed to learn." Master Liu nodded slowly, his weathered face showing what might have been the hint of a smile. "Match is over," he announced to the crowd. "Both fighters showed excellent technique and sportsmanship, but everyone in the gym knew that only one fighter had shown anything resembling excellence. Maya had just redefined what strength looked like in their little corner of the martial arts world. She had proven that true power didn't come from intimidation or hierarchy. It came from skill, respect, and the wisdom to know when to use both. As the crowd began to disperse, many students approached Maya with questions and compliments. But she noticed something even more important happening. The newer students, the ones who had been intimidated by the gym's aggressive culture, were standing a little taller. They